Okay, I think it's time that I went and put this engine in. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting a new rear main seal in. So there's a new seal. And it goes, and I've got an adapter to, much like I did on the 997, to push it into the correct depth. And I've just realised that this is the one for the 997, that's a manual gearbox. I need one for Tiptronic gearbox. So I'm going to have to go and print a new one off. So I'll just go and do that. Okay, so I've got a correct depth one now for the Tiptronic gearbox. As you can see, what it does, it pushes. I'll do these up, do all the screws up, the mounting bolts for the flex plate, and that pushes it into the correct depth of, I think it's 13mm. So let's get on with that and get that new seal in. Okay, and that's a rear main seal installed. Okay, so we're going to line up that pin on the flat drive plate, which is there. And give it a tap, make sure it's seated properly. Right, that seems to be on. Right, we've got no bolts to go in there. Okay, and with all parts, we're going to put these in a sort of a star cross pattern to make sure that we pull this plate down evenly. Got 25 metre set. Let's torque these off. So let's make this engine and box together. I didn't remove the torque converter from the box, so I made sure it stayed on. So that's still in the box, so we can just start mating these up now. I'm going to remove that cord that I used to make sure that the torque converter didn't fall off and get damaged. And when that's out of the way, we can push them together, or pull them together with the bolts even. Well, and of course we've got a strange Torx headed bolt, so we're going to need a different tool for this. It is standard as well, according to the manual. Okay, so the gearbox is on, so I'm going to bolt the flex plate onto the torque converter. Now, there's same as we took it off, there's a tool at the top that you drop in to hold it in place, line up the holes and turn the engine over till you get to each one, and there we go, tightened up, tightened on. Okay, so let's go on with building up the rest of this engine. We've got the starter motor on, I'm putting the AOS on and the hoses, then I'll get the manifold on, so let's get on with that. Okay, now I've placed the power steering pump on. I've not bolted it down yet because I've got to get the hoses on, and that's just easier to do without it being bolted in place. Otherwise you can't get to the hoses on the pump itself. So let's get those on. Okay, now there's 3 bolts to the pulley for the power steering pump, so let's get these in place. Right, now for the alternator, I've just swapped another couple of vacuum hoses on before I put the alternator in. Just slide that in and we'll put the reach around the back, plug the connector in and get the bolts in. Okay, it's still a bit too high on that trolley, so I'm going to get the trolley out and get a low profile jack with a board under it so the engine will be a bit lower down to the ground. I've got another small jack under the gearbox as well, so they're a bit lower. Yeah, there's the jack under the gearbox, just a cheap one, but that holds it. Okay, so we still need another couple of inches, so I'm going to be really careful here. The car's on the quick jacks. I'm going to lift the back of the car up to slide the engine under. I'm using the crane and the ratchet strap. Yeah, this is, as you can see, I'm looking very carefully at what the car is doing. I think we're okay. I'm just worried if them quick jacks start lifting, then I'm going to have to think of something else. But at the moment, it's looking pretty solid. So, yeah, I don't think I think that is quite stable, so let's push it under. Okay, so I just took this really slow, making sure I was clear of everything as I went round, pushed it in slowly, and yeah, it all went in fine. You might see that at the end I lowered the jack slightly. That's because the engine just wouldn't roll with the jack fully lowered, so I did have to raise the engine on the jack touch. Okay, before I actually lift the engine up, I want to clean these engine mounts up because of the water that got in there, so get a Dremel in there with some brushes on, give it a clean, and I'll probably make something, put some caps to go over the top so water doesn't get in there again. There we go, nice and clean now. Okay, so I'm going to use the crane to lift the engine into place, and I'll use the jack at the back to lift the gearbox up to keep them level. I want to make sure everything stays out of the way and doesn't get caught. Yeah, this is going to go really slowly, but better safe than sorry. Okay, I can get these bolts in on the rear engine mounts, and that's the back of the engine in, and then we'll move on to bolting the gearbox in. Okay, so I'm going to secure the bracket to the gearbox, and then I'll move on to securing the bracket to the body. There we go. Okay, now we've got the bracket that goes on the back of the engine and the engine mount, which also secures the exhaust. Okay, now time to get the air conditioning unit back in. This is going to be a fiddler. Okay, now we're going to get a couple of wobble extensions and other extension on, and we need that flexibility to get to that bolt at the back of the aircon unit. As you can see, we need to get a hand around there. That's why we've not put the tank on the power steering lever. Okay, back to the underside of the car, and we're going to start connecting up hoses, etc., which I've pushed some of the water hoses on. Now we're getting the Tiptronic cable on, connecting it up to the multi-switch. Use some pliers, well, in this case, some long-nose mole grips to squeeze that connector back on. Right, next we'll put this clip onto the other end, and then that pushes into a bracket which holds that end of the cable while the other end moves. So let's get that on. Okay, did you hear that clunk? That was a no shit moment. The bracket snapped. And that is a cast aluminium. Okay, there's the bit that broke off. That's it. There. Now that holds the Tiptronic gear change. This bracket also carries the water cooling for the Tiptronic gearbox. It's aluminium. Whole bracket is that might come off. Yeah, I might be able to take the bracket off. Okay, so there's that broken part of that bracket, and that bracket bolts onto the gearbox and it holds the water cooler for the gearbox. Tried to get one of the bolts out. I can only get to 2 of them, and obviously, yeah, they're being held by galvanic corrosion. And bolts are just like their heads do, and when you try to get the manifold bolts out, and it actually broke one of my Torx bits trying to undo that. So I think all I can do is drop the engine and gearbox again, get in there with a drill or a heat source and try and get them bolts out to get that bracket off. I've had a look at new brackets, a few £100, but I think we can probably get it welded. I know a place where I normally get stuff like this welded. I reckon they can do it for me. So that's the next stage. I'm going to have to get the box out again, get this bracket off and try and get it repaired. If it can't be repaired, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and buy a new bracket.